Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at Wildcatters. This is a 2 to 4 player area majority route building economic game, where you take the role of one of 4 oil pioneers. From 1870 to 1908, 4 major oil companies were started: Royal Dutch, Standard, Anglo-Persian, and Pacific Coast. You'll take the role of one of these pioneers and their company, and you will be drilling for oil, building rigs and refineries, as well as tankers and trains to transport your oil around the world, trying to become the most successful oil pioneer. How do you become the most successful oil pioneer and win the game? By having the most victory points at the end of 7 or 8 rounds, depending on the number of players. Now that we know what the winning condition is, let's take a look at the components, setup, and how gameplay works in Wildcatters. Now let's take a look at the components. You have the main game board, round marker, player sequence chips, area cards, worker tokens that represent 5 workers, Wildcatter discs, consolidation chips. In each player color, you have a summary card, drilling rigs, oil tankers, trains, oil barrels, refineries, pump jacks, D2 chips, D3 chips, refinery chip, victory point marker, share cards, share tokens that represent 4 shares, and your rulebook. Now let's take a look at the setup. We're going to be setting this up for a 4-player game, which takes 14 steps. Step 1, place the main board in the center of the play area. Step 2, place share cards and share tokens. Place the share cards on their indicated spaces on the main board. Then, place the share tokens, which represent 4 shares, next to their matching share cards. Step 3, place worker cards and worker tokens. Place worker cards on their indicated space on the bottom right of the main board. Then place the worker tokens, which represent 5 workers, next to the worker cards. Step 4, place the round marker. Place the round marker on 1 on the compass on the main board. Step 5. Place consolidation chips. You'll place a set of consolidation chips in ascending order on each of the 4 area spaces at the top right of the main board. Step 6. Separate, shuffle, and place area cards. You'll separate the area cards by the back of the cards, light and dark. Then you'll shuffle each stack and place them next to the main board. Keep in mind when you're playing a 2 or 3 player game to reference your rulebook during this setup. Step 7, choose a color and get the player components. You'll choose a color and get the matching drilling rigs, trains, oil tankers, barrels, pump jacks, refineries, refinery chip, and summary card. Step 8, determine the start player. Randomly select a start player and give them the 1 sequence chip, and then in clockwise order, give the remaining players 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Step 9, collect shares and workers. You'll collect 20 shares of your player color and 5 shares of the player color to your left. Then you will collect workers. In a 4-player game, you will collect 20 workers. In a 3-player game, you will collect 15, 16, and 18 workers in turn order. And in a 2-player game, you'll select 18 workers and 20 workers in turn order. So in this case, each player will get 20 workers. Keep in mind that shares are hidden information and should be kept face down. Step 10, place victory point markers. Each player will place their victory point marker on 10 on the victory point track. Step 11, place starting supplies. From your player components, you will collect 3 rigs, 2 trains, a refinery, and a tanker. Then you will proceed to place your starting supplies. You'll place your tanker in either of the 2 Southern Africa harbors. Then you will deal each player 8 light-colored area cards, and in turn order, go around discarding 1 card and placing any one of your remaining supplies in that specific area indicated on the card. Then you'll continue clockwise until all the players place their starting supplies and discard their last 2 cards. Keep in mind when doing so, no continents can contain more than 1 refinery. If a refinery is already built in that particular continent, you may use that area card to place a refinery in Europe, Africa, or Australia. Step 12, shuffle, combine, and place the area deck. You will shuffle all of the light area cards and place them on top of the dark area cards to combine the decks, and then place them next to the main board. Step 13, place Wildcatter discs. you'll place one Wildcatter disc on a single oil field in each of the 8 areas. If any of these areas contain less than 2 drilling rigs, you'll place a second Wildcatter disc on top of the one that is already placed. Step 14. Draw area cards. You'll draw the top 8 area cards and place them face up to create the display next to the deck. Now let's take a look at the gameplay. A game consists of a number of rounds based on the number of players. In a 4-player game, you will have 7 rounds, and in a 2 to 3 player game, you will have 8 rounds. A round. A round consists of 2 phases: beginning of the round and general action phase or turns. Now let's look at each phase in detail. Phase 1, beginning of the round. You will skip this phase in round 1. During this phase, all players will receive 10 workers from the bank, advance the round marker, replenish the area cards. You'll discard the top area card, slide and replenish any open spots. Get 1 share per consolidation chip that you own. If it is the 5th round, you may choose to repay loans at 18 shares per loan. Keep in mind that if you repay loans at the end of the game, it will cost you 25 shares. And then if it is the final round, you must determine turn order. Then we would move to phase 2, the general action phase or turns. In turn order, players will take a turn by taking 7 action steps. 1. Choose an area card. 2. Get bonus. 3. Build. 4. Oil actions. 5. Move unused tankers. 6. Empty partially filled refineries. And 7. End of player turn. Now let's look at each of these steps in detail. Choose an area card. You will choose one of the 8 face-up area cards and place it face up in your player area. Keep in mind that you can clear and refresh the area cards for 4 victory points. Also, keep in mind that you will get the bonuses located on this card, and you would build and drill in the area depicted on the card. So in this case, our first player, Yellow, chose a card. Then we move to step 2, get area card bonus. You'll gain the bonus depicted on the card. The types of bonuses you will see on cards are workers, which are your hammer symbol. You will gain that many workers from the bank. Shares, which are the star symbol in that color, also from the bank. Victory points, which are your oil drops, and you will receive that at the end of the game. The ship or refinery will allow you to empty 1 partially filled refinery during step 6 or at the end of the game. Keep in mind that when you use this action, the card is discarded. So in this case, Yellow will get a victory point at the end of the game and 3 green shares. Then we go to step 3, build. You may use workers to build rigs, trains, tankers, and refineries. To start, you can convert shares to workers. You may pay 3 shares of any color per 1 worker. Keep in mind that you can only build in the indicated area on your card in 1 white continent. When building drilling rigs, in each area, for the 1st through 3rd rig of your color, you would pay 4 workers each. When you place the 4th drilling rig of your color in that area, you would pay 6. When building refineries, you may build a refinery in the chosen area or a white continent for 12 workers. You can only build 1 refinery per round, and you would get the victory points at the end of the game based on the number of refineries that you built. The refineries are used to transport oil and deliver them to the continent. When building trains and tankers cost 2 workers. You can build any amount, and then you may build 1 train in a white continent. So in this case, Yellow built a refinery in a white continent, built a train, and an oil rig, costing them 18 workers. Then we move to step 4, oil actions, where you will drill for oil, develop oil fields, and transport to refineries. Drilling for oil. When 4 or more rigs are in your chosen area, you can pay 8 workers to drill for oil. You would replace 1 rig for 1 pump jack token and place 3 oil barrels on it. Then any other players with rigs in that area can pay 3 shares to the active player to replace 1 of their rigs. Then, if there are any Wildcatter discs in that area, you would auction the Wildcatter discs off. They're auctioned off 1 at a time and will produce 1 barrel immediately, and then the players will get victory points for the number of discs at the end of the game. Auctions are done 1 at a time. You must have a pump jack in the area to bid in this auction. You would bid using your own shares. The active player starts the bidding at 4, or they can pass. Keep in mind that you can bid more than your owned shares by taking a loan. The winner would place an oil barrel of their color on the disc. Then when the barrel is transported off the disc, that player would get the disc. Keep in mind that the winning player will now choose to use a refinery chip or not. This would allow them to empty a refinery. They would place their refinery chip over that refinery so that no other deliveries can occur this turn. Then after the turn is over, they would discard the chip. Developing oil fields. This is where oil fields in an area that have already struck oil can have rigs replaced with pump jacks. You would pay 3 workers to replace one of your rigs with a pump jack and 3 barrels. And transporting oil. This is where oil travels from pump jacks to refineries. You'd pay 4 workers to transport 1 barrel from each of your pump jacks or Wildcatter discs with a barrel in the area. Keep in mind that other players with barrels in the area can transport 1 from each of theirs as well without paying the 4 workers. Then you would travel by tanker and or train to refineries. You would pay 1 of your shares per barrel to the owner of the train you use to travel, and 1 share per barrel to the tanker owner. When placing the barrels in refineries, you would gain 2 shares per barrel placed in another player's refinery. Keep in mind that when you're using tankers to travel to another continent, the destination is chosen by the owner of the tanker if they have oil on the tanker. Then if not, the player that placed first on the tanker. Only 1 destination per tanker during this action. The maximum load of a tanker is 3 barrels. If all of these spots in a particular destination's refinery is full, you can move the tanker to another refinery. And if all are full, it is returned to the original area's harbor. So in this case, yellow is not performing any oil actions. Then we move to step 5. Move your unused tankers. You may move any of your unused tankers to any harbor. The first time you do this, it's free, and you would pay 1 worker for any additional tankers moved. And then we move to step 6. Empty partially filled refineries. You may use an area card to empty 1 refinery of your choice, or you may use a refinery chip to empty a refinery that you own. When delivering oil barrels to a continent, for your own, you would deliver it for in-game victory points to that continent, or choose not to deliver it to the continent and place it back in your supply for 4 shares from the bank of your choice color. For any other player's barrels that you deliver to a continent, you would get 4 shares of your choice color from the bank. Then we move to step 7, end of turn. During this step, any refinery with 5 barrels are emptied. The owners of the refineries are the ones that deliver and gain the shares. Also during this step, for the active area, you can buy the consolidation chip for that area. You would pay the shares depicted of each color and gain the chip. Then finally, you would refresh the area cards. You would slide the cards up and fill in any missing spots. Keep in mind that you can take a loan. A loan is 10 shares. You would place one of your barrels on your color on the bank on the board to indicate the loan. You would be able to pay the loan back for 18 shares in round 5 or 25 shares at the end of the game. Then turns would continue until all players finish their turn and the round is over. So in this case, we would move to blue, and then green, and then red. Then the next round would begin, and rounds would continue until the end of the final round, when we would go into the final scoring. Final scoring takes 9 steps. Step 1, for every refinery area card, you may empty a refinery. Step 2, score consolidation and refinery chips on hand. Step 3, gain the victory points for your area cards. Step 4, gain the victory points for your Wildcatter discs. Step 5, gain the victory points for your refineries. Step 6, pay off loans. Step 7, trade 3 to 1 for shares to workers. Step 8, gain victory points for the number of workers. And then step 9, gain victory points for the most oil delivered to each continent. Once all the victory points are added up, the player with the most victory points is the most successful oil pioneer and wins Wildcatters.